Thank you so much. You saw the video. It's in many ways self-explanatory. You know, it doesn't take much expertise in the criminal justice system to know that our system is inherently stacked against the poor who lack the resources to navigate the courts or to fight unreasonable charges or harsh sentences. Tens of thousands of men are trapped in a cycle of imprisonment and reincarceration through repeat offenses and parole violations and little technicalities like unpaid fines. It's easy to blame the individuals who've been caught, but it's much harder to examine the ways in which it's difficult to overcome the circumstances of poverty, of violence, and a lack of economic opportunity that have been put in front of them. We're joined today by this remarkable young man who was trapped in that vicious incarceration cycle. His name is Johnny Perez, and he's now a reentry advocate for the Urban Justice Center, as you saw in that video. He spent nearly 2 decades behind bars and was released from the Bear Hill Correctional Institute just 14 months ago. Thanks so much, Johnny, for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
First of all, it's been more than a year. How are you doing? How is this time different than previous times?
I'm doing very well. What's different this time is that I feel more prepared. I actually took the time, to equip myself with the skills and the education in order to raise the likelihood that I will succeed out here. I actually had a plan this time.
What was the plan?
My plan was to continue pursuing my education, to be a father, and to never forget all the things that I went through in order to kind of continue going and doing the right thing.
Let's dive into some of that. You grew up in the South Bronx in the 90s. Tell us a little bit about being swept up into the life on the streets. What was your first arrest, for example?
So my first arrest was for stealing cars when I was real young. I was like 13, 14 years old. Stole some cars, and then those crimes escalated to eventually I was arrested for gun possession at 16. And it was just something that, we kind of just did. It didn't really feel like, okay, I'm actually breaking the law, I'm going to steal a car, so on and so forth.
And you were saying that you're sort of seduced by the dark side, that there's a status that goes along with being criminal.
Well, it's real difficult to kind of combat the criminal lifestyle when, you're put in a situation where you're making $500-600 a day. And people, there's the positive reinforcement is to continue committing crime. The women love you, the guys respect you, so on and so forth. It's real easy to kind of get swept up into that, especially when the alternative is, school. Like, to me, school was just somewhere where, like, people went to become doctors and lawyers and things like that.
Tell us a little bit about the police presence in the South Bronx. We were talking about Ferguson. Some people describe it as like a neighborhood under siege.
So one of the difficult things about growing up is that, with such, so many cops and all that, is that you're actually victimized by them so many times. It was times when they pulled me over and just took the money I had in my pocket because I didn't have a pay stub. They would put me in the backseat of the car, drive me around, parade me around different neighborhoods, and then drop me off right in front of everybody as if nothing happened. And for my neighborhood, that's kind of frowned upon. It's looked like as if you're cooperating with the officers, but the reality
makes you look
is
like a snitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that you're actually refusing to cooperate with them, if you don't, then they fix you.
Right. And during those years, there was one stretch where you were arrested basically once a month for a year.
Yeah, and a lot of those arrests were like for small, like, possession of marijuana, trespassing in my own building where I lived at, by the way, and just being at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing whatever.
And yet you described a time in which you spent cumulatively 3 years in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
How do you survive the box?
I was telling you backstage.
And well, I find it intriguing.
a lot of push-ups, a lot of reading, when available, and just having that will of, and sometimes people believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And my mother, she's been a real instrumental part in my process, and knowing that she didn't bring me into this country to be, spend my years inside of a cage, gave me the will to continue on, you know?
I know your mother is here in the audience
Yeah, I don't know.
somewhere, but you
Yes.
described very poignantly what it was like when she would occasionally come visit you and you would be in the box.
Yeah, it'd be difficult. Sometimes I'd be still handcuffed at the waist and, you know, not being able to hug her. We would have to rub our faces together or she would kiss me. And the message that I received from that was that you are not worth of a hug, you know?
Right.
Even when it comes from your own family members, you know, real dehumanizing.
You described crying yourself to sleep, vowing never to go back,
Yeah.
and yet you went back. Your crimes escalated. How does that happen?
A lack of pure ignorance, a lack of opportunities, a lack of being able to recognize what your opportunities were. I mean, look, when I was 16 years old, I was not trying to decide whether I should go to band camp or karate school. I was trying to decide, you know, how I'm going to duck the police tomorrow. You know, those were the decisions that, in my mind, that I was faced with, and the decisions that I felt I had to make at that age and at that time.
And yet, like a lot of our kids, you're trying to figure out, how am I going to get ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Like any kid out there. Your last arrest came November 28th, 2000, just 2 days after your daughter was born. You were convicted at that point of armed robbery, sentenced to 15 years.
Yeah.
What was your reaction?
I cried a lot. My first offer was 25 years, and the attorney said, well, are we going to take it or not? And I'm like, are you serious? You know, it was a real dark time in my life, real dark time. And I couldn't understand how, you know, I never, you know, physically hurt anyone. No one lost their life. And there were people being convicted of murder who only got 8 years. And how did I get 15? Real confusing time. I didn't know anything about the law, you know, and, you know, real confused at the time.
We talked about backstage the neighborhood, you know, where there's liquor stores and pawn shops. What's that milieu, and what impact does that have on you?
Well, strong. I mean, you know, the pawn shop say we buy gold, as if people from low-income neighborhoods have gold laying around the pawn, you know? So, you know, it's like, this is, and the message that is sending is that, you know, I think a friend of mine, Glenn, he called, you know, he says poverty pimping, and I agree with that, you know.
Poverty
as far
pimping?
As, yes, you know, taking advantage of people because of where they're at in life, and not because, you know, trying to, you just generating a situation where you're taking advantage of people's situation instead of creating avenues for people to better and empower themselves.
We talk about this avenue of poverty and racism. What impact has racism had on your incarceration and that cycle?
Huge. And I mean, I've been called a nigga to my face, and I don't usually use the N-word, but, you know, and that's difficult when the
by
person...
guards.
Yes, by guards, yes, absolutely. You know, and you know, that's real difficult to deal with when you're in a completely powerless situation, and you know that the person you're talking to, who has complete power over you, you know, doesn't like you, not because of what you did, but because of, quote-unquote, who you are, and that's a different kind of animal there.
Give us a glimpse inside the legal system. What kind of representation did you get?
Zero. If I would been probably, you know, if I was more fluent, I'd probably been able to, you know, probably even beat my case. You know, it's real hard fighting a case from inside of prison. You know, you don't have, you know, equal access to the courts, equal access to the law. You know, that can't even hire private investigators. It's real difficult fighting a case from behind bars.
And now that you are an advocate and you work in helping people with reentry, I mean, the panel just before us is what's the purpose of jail? Is it rehab? Is it punishment? And how do you soften that blow coming back out?
Right now, it's punishment, and then there's a whole, you know, there's an economic, you know, factor there with people making money, especially when you talk about the privatization of prison, where there's that that conflict of interest there. You know,
some people call it the prison industrial complex.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's in the warden's best interest to keep a person in versus, you know, going out. But it should be rehabilitative. Let's talk about the issues. You know, let's give people the opportunity to educate them. Let's give them drug treatment if they need it, not just lock you away in a cell and give you a year in a box for smoking a joint.
Clearly, we could talk for endless amounts of time. So what are your hopes and dreams? What's the future for you?
So, I hope to. One of the things that I feel strongly about, and again, to, you know, kind of echo, you know, I guess Just Leadership's main mission is talking about as far as having people who are directly affected, you know, by different social injustices involved in the different conversations that are going on. You know, there's somebody in Washington right now creating laws for people that are affecting me, and there's that disconnect. And I know that there's that disconnect because I actually live there. You You know, I've lived through that. I've seen the policies up close, and I know that the way that they look on paper does not work in real life. You know, so that gives me a unique perspective and puts me in a unique position to add to those conversations. You know.
Well, Mr. Johnny Perez, thank you so much.
I appreciate
That's his
it.
Twitter handle, by the way.
Yeah, Mrs.
At
Thank you.
Mr. Johnny Perez.
Yeah,
thank you so much for sharing.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.